Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Pat Kendall and I own a small side hustle woodworking business where I make crafts, cabinetry. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down a couple books that I've been reading. Lately I've been really diving into business development books, leadership books. Here are 5 of my favorites that I've read over the past year. I'm not only going to review them and give you the key concepts in those books, but I'm also going to try and show you how I was able to take the learnings from those books and implement them into my business. Hopefully you're able to take some of those examples and apply them into your business. The first book that I'm going to touch on is a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. The concept of this book is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. It's important for a small business or any business to define why they are doing what they're doing and use that to help make decisions throughout the course of their business. It's also important when you're working as a team that everyone's working towards the same mission statement. How it impacted me personally. This book had a big impact on me because it made me realize that I don't really think about this enough. I don't think about why I do things. I usually think about maybe a goal that I'm trying to reach, or I think about different things that I'm trying to obtain, whether it's money, tools, or different achievements. So after reading this book, I really had to think, this book not only opened my eyes to things that I should be doing in my business, but also things I should be doing in my life. When I started thinking like this, it really made me reassess my priorities, helped me make decisions a lot easier, and really just led me towards a happier and more confident life. Some of the concepts that I specifically took away from this book, your mission statement should be an unachievable goal. It should not be financially driven, and it should not be self-serving. So what would be an unachievable goal? A very simple, unachievable goal that I can think of is to stimulate my local economy. There is no end to that goal. There's no spot where I say, okay, I have reached the finish line. That's the whole idea behind the book, is that you're always playing this infinite game, which, by the way, is another Simon Sinek book called Infinite Game, and it's worth reading. So it's very important to figure out what that goal is, or what that mission statement is, and start driving everyone in your team towards it. And it gives lots of different case studies in which companies defined their mission statement and then made a drastic decision that seemed ridiculous, but in the long run turned out to be a great decision for them. How did this book impact my business? So this book impacted my business by showing me that your customers are going to connect with you on a deeper level if you are sharing common goals, common core values, and if you're working towards the same mission. If someone is looking for a piece of furniture, then they could go to many different places. But if they find someone that is selling furniture, but they only source the materials locally, they try and support locally owned shops, and they're also working towards the goal of making furniture in such a way that it doesn't get thrown out after 5 years, then those two people might find that they're a lot more likely to strike up a deal than just someone that is just trying to sell something. So that, with that mission statement in mind, this helps me make some of my decisions in my business. So if I am going to buy lumber from a big box store where it might be a little bit cheaper, or am I going to buy lumber from the local lumber yard? So based on my mission statement, the choice is clear. This also brought up another idea of mine. I want my furniture to last a lifetime and for my customers to not want to throw it out after 5 years. For this reason, I'm offering free refinishing for the life of the product. The key takeaway for you guys is that a clear mission statement is not just some fluff. It can be a very powerful decision-making tool. When your why is strong, it can guide daily choices and attract new customers, and altogether just make your business a lot stronger. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. The core idea of this book is to not just work in your business, but to work on your business. The book dives into a lot of different case studies, mostly where someone that works in a trade or has some sort of a skill decides they're going to make a business, and they have an entrepreneurial spark. Then they dive into the whole business and they find themselves being that trade in their business, when in fact the entrepreneur needs to work on the business to try and develop it, where the business is the product, not necessarily the thing you're selling. And the best business that you can build will run on systems, and those systems will not require your constant personal involvement. How this changed my thinking. I started my woodworking business thinking, I like to do woodworking. I'm going to start a business. In that business, I'm going to do a ton of woodworking. The reality is when you go into a business with that mindset, you can turn something you love into stressful, exhausting work. True business growth comes with developing reliable systems that can run without you. Some of the key concepts that I liked from this book. Thinking like a franchise owner. Michael Gerber talks a lot about McDonald's in this book and how he believes it may be the greatest company to ever live. The reason that he believes McDonald's is so great is because they have standardized every single aspect of that company. The company at its core is simply just a burger joint. If you open up a burger joint, you may need a very experienced fry cook that really knows what they're doing in order to get it right. In McDonald's, because the systems are so ingrained in the company, you can hire someone that's in the 10th grade at high school, and they are going to be able to run their station just as well as the most skilled fry cook could in that same McDonald's, because there's systems, you follow the systems, and if you follow the systems, you get the same result. How I applied this to my business. There's a few ways where I started trying to think a little differently, specifically documentation and standard operating procedures. So for documentation, quoting and design approval documents, I decided were the two most important documents to automate. So what I did is I used ChatGPT to create a standardized document that I could cut and paste for every project. I would just need to fill in a few lines to detail out different aspects, and then I would be left with a very pretty quote and contract, as well as a design approval doc that laid out all the different terms and conditions. If I were to hire someone new and I wanted them to start doing quoting, I could train them how to do that very quickly. As far as the standard operating procedure goes, now I've documented the procedure or the life cycle of a project and what key milestones have to happen before the next milestone can happen. A lot of this has to do with right near the beginning and the end and when payment comes, and I plan to continue to refine it. Key takeaways for you and your business. Build a business that can run without you, even if you never plan to leave. The more your systems can handle, the less stress you are going to have as your business grows. The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz. The core idea of the Pumpkin Plan is built off of studying giant pumpkin farmers and drawing parallels between them and business. The book starts by explaining how a giant pumpkin farmer creates a giant pumpkin. They start by sourcing the best possible seeds. They plant those seeds, and their vine will then produce an abundance of pumpkins. On those pumpkins, only one or two will actually show promise of eventually becoming a giant pumpkin. All the other pumpkins are just going to be absorbing nutrients that could otherwise be sent to those giant pumpkins. So what the pumpkin farmer will do at that point is remove the smaller pumpkins, which are stealing valuable resources from the giant pumpkins. In your business, the seeds have to do with the kind of marketing you're going to do. The pumpkins are your customers, and the giant pumpkins are your best customers. In other words, do lots of marketing to attract lots of customers. When you have all those customers, find which customers are the most promising and remove the rest. How it changed my thinking. This was so counterintuitive to me when I was reading it. I always believed that a company's strength relied on how many customers they had. If they have more customers, they are a better company. But in fact, it is quality over quantity, of course. This book made me realize that less can be better in a lot of different scenarios, as long as the less is very high quality customers that are giving you business that can sustain your company. Not to mention that the low value customers usually come with a lot of baggage like stress, time, complaints, nitpicky requests, and other things that can totally be avoided by firing those customers and focusing all your team's energy on the giant pumpkins. Some concepts that I took away from this book. Stop growing a company for the sake of growth. So many companies are born and then their goal is to get bigger. Why do they want to get bigger? Usually they just say, because that's what you do as a company. You want to get as big as possible. But have you ever stopped to think, what would my company look like if it stayed small? What if my company only had 4, 5, 6 customers, and those 6 customers were such high value customers that I didn't even need to grow any more than the team that I already have? It was also important for me to learn that it's okay to fire customers if they're not the right fit for you. That was a very foreign idea to me. If you are serving fewer customers, that means you have more time to focus on quality. You have less stress from complaints. And assuming that these customers you're focusing on are high value customers, you are going to have more profit per job. How I applied this to my business. An example I'll talk about here is that I was selling cornhole boards. I was selling them for a value in which I was trying to stay competitive with other marketed cornhole boards on Amazon or other people in the area. So I was pricing them out at $200, $250. And at the end of the day, I was not really enjoying making them because I was looking back at the time I spent versus the profits I was making, and also the type of work that I was doing, which was basically painting boxes, which is fine for some people, but it's not exactly why I started the woodworking business. And all of those things compounding together, I just decided that these aren't my ideal customers. I actually priced them so well and I was able to make them at a high enough quality that it attracted so many customers that I was eventually becoming the cornhole guy around town, and people were telling their friends and I was getting more orders. And sooner or later, when the right project came along, when the high quality customer came along, I was going to be booked up. I wouldn't have time for them and I wouldn't have the energy to give them the focus that they needed. Luckily, this dawned on me when I got 2 customers that were requesting built-in cabinetry. And after I did the jobs, the work was so fulfilling. It was exactly what I wanted for my business. I didn't want to completely stop offering cornhole boards. I just hiked the price up to a value in which I was comfortable doing the work. So what was $200 is now $500. And that deterred a lot of customers, but it did not deter all the customers. There were still a handful of people who really wanted a cornhole board that had custom insignias on it, or their family name, or a design that they picked out specifically themselves, and they were willing to pay the money. That freed up enough time that I was only doing maybe 1 cornhole board a month. And when I did do that cornhole board, it was actually nice because it was a fairly easy job and I was making good money. And I still had time to entertain the jobs that I was actually looking for. The key takeaway for your business is that you do not need every customer. You do not need to grow for the sake of growing. You just need the right customers. Price can be a powerful filter. You do not need to be super competitive in everything you do. If you aren't enjoying the work, if it's not what you want for your company, then price yourself out of the job. If someone is still willing to pay that price, then great. Now you're making good money, but the odds of you getting a huge influx of that project that you're dreading from that customer that you're not looking forward to dealing with are much lower, and you are going to have much more time and energy to focus on the customer that's going to give you a higher quality job with more profit potential. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. Core idea of this book is that you are responsible for everything in your life and your business. Nearly every outcome in your business or life, good or bad, can be traced back to something that you did or did not do. The fastest way to improve your life or your business is to own your problems, learn from them, and fix them. How this book changed my way of thinking. This book was my introduction to this genre of leadership and business books, and it really kicked off my reading journey. This book really made me realize how often people, including me, make excuses for different situations that come up in their lives and try and find people to blame and try and find reasons why there's nothing they could have done to prevent it. This book helped me focus more on my actions and more specifically my reactions to different situations that might arise and how that can have a positive impact on different outcomes. In other words, I started making everything my fault. If something's my fault, then I can fix it. As soon as a problem becomes someone else's fault, I can't control that person. I throw my hands up in the air and say, there's nothing I can do. And that's not a very productive way to think. Key concepts that I took away from this book. The book was written by 2 retired Navy SEALs who fought in the Battle of Ramadi in Iraq. And the book will usually go chapter by chapter, and the format will be that they'll start with a war story where one of these leadership ideas came into play. They'll go through the story, what they learned, what happened. They'll talk about the principle, and then they will branch off into their current leadership consulting business, where they do a case study with a client who's going through a similar situation, and they draw parallels between the two. 2 of these chapters I specifically remember. One was understanding why, and the other was keep it simple. Understanding why really dives into how important it is to explain to your subordinates or your leadership why something is needed, why something is necessary. You see it a lot with parents who are trying to parent their children, and they ask why, and they say, because I said so. And this just dives into how inefficient that approach is, and getting them to truly understand the mission. Then they can be more empowered to help you get to the finish line. Keep it simple was another concept that I liked a lot. It talked about different missions that they did in Iraq and how simpler was always better, especially when working with a team. It's so important to keep it simple so that everyone knows exactly what they need to do in order to achieve some sort of a mission or a goal. How I applied this to my business. Understanding why, I worked very hard on my contracts and my design approval documents to try and make sure that communication and transparency was happening between me and the customer. I always wanted them to know why I was doing something, why something was priced the way it was, and specifically if additional prices had to happen to a project, whether a change happened or not, I wanted them to be on the same page as me and explain why that was happening. I implemented Keep It Simple in my business with my bookkeeping. And bookkeeping is a very generous term for what I do. It is beyond simple that a lot of you that are more into accounting and bookkeeping would scoff at what I do. So I just have an Excel sheet, and if something is an expense to the business, it gets put in the expense column. If something is income to the business, it gets put in the income column. I subtract the expenses from the income. That tells me how much money the business is making. I keep it super simple that way. I break this up month by month, so I want to know how much money I made in January, February, March, and then I will have one summary page which tells me how much money I have in total. And that is basically just how I decide how healthy the business is, how healthy my projects are, and if I'm spending too much money. Key takeaways for your business: when you take ownership of problems, you get control of those problems and you get the ability to fix them. If you're not willing to take ownership, those problems are not going to get fixed. You're waiting for someone else to do it. It's someone else's fault. It's someone else's problem. And you're going to be left with, well, a lot of problems on your plate. Everything that happens in your business or life can be traced back to a decision that you made at some point. If you're unwilling to retrace your steps and find that decision and learn from it and fix it, then you are going to have a little bit of trouble growing. The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. The core idea of the 4-Hour Workweek is that retirement as we know it is a broken system. People everywhere are grinding and working hard and long hours every day in the prime of their lives in the hopes that they could save enough money to enjoy their life once they turn 65. In this book, Tim talks about how rather than trying to save and plan for the future, you should start building a life now that you don't have to retire from. The other aspect that he touches on a lot is that people don't actually want to be rich. They don't want to have a bank account with millions of dollars. What they truly want is the freedom that comes with those riches. Tim explains that that freedom can be achieved without winning the lottery. All you need to do is you need to build a life through smart design of your work, your lifestyle, and your revenue streams. How did this change my thinking? I was pretty skeptical at first when I opened the book up. The idea of only needing to work 4 hours a week sounded like one of those snake oil salesmen. But the more I read, the more I could see where he was coming from. And it got me more and more excited about how I could potentially use some of these ideas in my own life. I'm now looking at different aspects of my life through a different lens. I'm trying to build a lifestyle that requires less money, as well as building different revenue streams and trying to figure out a way that I can work remotely or even work simply 4 hours a week and still get the amount of money that I need to live that lifestyle that I built. Some key concepts that I took away from the book. Passive income. Tim stresses a lot through the entirety of the book the importance of passive income, making money while you sleep. He talks about many different types of passive income, things like books, podcasts, real estate, blogs, investing, things that require minimum effort up front and then grow exponentially as time goes on. Remote work, the idea of trying to build a job that you can do remotely and that you can do for only a small amount of time a week. 80-20 rule, the idea that 20% of the actions you take are going to get you 80% of the results. Minimal lifestyle, simplifying expenses, living a fulfilling life without a huge income, getting rid of a lot of stuff you don't need, not upgrading your life as you upgrade your income. Finding a muse. For this book, I was focusing on my woodworking business, thinking this could be my full-time job. I could do this for the rest of my life. I really enjoy woodworking. But the more I thought about it and the more I read the book, he talks a lot about trading time for money and how trading time for money also leaves you a lot less room to take breaks or go on vacations, because as soon as you stop spending the time, you stop getting the money. This led me more to think that woodworking should be treated in my life as a muse that can make money but doesn't need to make money. So with that in mind, I'm looking more into other revenue streams so that woodworking can stay fun and I can do it when I want to, not because I need to. How I applied this to my life. I started experimenting with some remote work at my full-time job. This has given me a little bit more time to spend with my family. I can come home a little bit earlier, and then once my son goes to bed, my office, and I can work for a couple hours. I've also started working on growing a passive income stream in the form of these YouTube videos. Another passive income stream that I'm interested in building is investing in some real estate property, as well as an investment account in my bank. Another method of income that we never really thought of before was actually renting out our house. We have access to my wife's cottage, and we also want to go on all these trips, but the house is always just empty when we do those things. So we're starting to entertain the idea of, when we go away for a weekend to the cottage, maybe we can look at making a little extra money and renting out the house. And likewise, if we wanted to do a 2-week or even a month-long trip somewhere, then we could make a lot of money back home, and that could pay our bills while we're gone. The idea of focusing on the 20% instead of the full 100 has also given me a different perspective on things. Trying to focus my time and energy on that 20% that's going to give the 80% of results has been pretty eye-opening as to where I'm wasting a lot of time. Lastly, I'm trying to build a lifestyle that is less expensive. And my wife and I have started an Excel sheet that lists all our monthly expenses. We've been trying to subtract wherever we can. So we've erased a few of our streaming platforms. We've gotten rid of a few monthly expenses. We called up our insurance company and we found out that we actually can get a slightly cheaper rate because of our driving records. And calling around, trying to get rid of some of the rentals, like our hot water heater. We're trying to pay off one of our cars a little more aggressively, so that'll free up more monthly expenses. The idea being to reduce that amount of money you need every month in order to survive, and then you need to be happy with that lifestyle, and then you try not to upgrade it. So if I were to get a raise at work, do I need to now purchase a new monthly subscription? Do I need to go get a fancier vehicle? My wife and I have talked, and we realized that a lot of those stuff is not bringing us joy. We want to focus on experiences. We want to focus on freedom and time. The last thing I'll mention that this book helped me was to start thinking about a future company that I can start that can run on 4 hours a week, or that can even run without me. So I've never even thought of that. I've never even considered it. I always thought if I'm starting a business, I need to be involved in that business from Monday to Friday for the rest of my life to make sure it runs properly. But just the idea that this is even possible has just got me thinking and trying to brainstorm different ways to achieve that. And it's very exciting. So I highly recommend this book, even just to get you excited about what could possibly be your future and make you think a little bit differently on how to plan for that. Key takeaways for you and your business. Design a life that you do not need to retire from. Build out as many revenue streams as you can. Try to make them as passive as possible. And any revenue streams that you have that do require your time, try and keep them as low as possible. Automate and outsource to achieve that. If you have something you really enjoy, maybe don't jump to try and turn it into a business right away. Think about maybe keeping it as a fun hobby activity and treat it more like a muse. So that's my journey so far. There's 5 different books, 5 different perspectives on business and life, and a lot of different ideas that I'm trying to implement in my business. If there's one thing that I've learned from all this is that growth, whether in business, life, or mindset, isn't about reading a book and magically changing. It's about taking 1 or 2 ideas that really resonate with you and slowly weaving them into your daily life. I'm still figuring all this out, but I'm really enjoying the journey and I'm really enjoying all these books I'm reading. If you read any of these books or you have one that really changed the way that you'd run your business, I'd love to hear your recommendation down in the comments. And if you want to follow along more as I continue to build my business out, I would love it if you like and subscribe this video and follow along on my other videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.